Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. If you are a Michigan fan that follows this program on the recruiting trail, you probably feel pretty similar to myself. And that is, hey, that it feels like there's some momentum building for this program on the recruiting trail, although that has not necessarily manifested itself yet in public commitments. You kind of feel like that's what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of days and weeks. Want to have a, for lack of better terms, overarching conversation in terms of where Michigan sits in this 2026 cycle. We're going to start with some names that Michigan has made some significant moves for. And then secondly, we're heading into a monster official visit weekend for Michigan. Who are the names that Michigan needs to make moves on over the next couple of days? Kind of my personal opinion, some of my favorite targets on Michigan's board. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, the Michigan fans, number one, appreciate you guys. I know many of y'all follow the recruiting trail just about as closely as I do, and it's been a blast talking ball with y'all in the comment section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. It's going to be busy over the next couple of days and weeks as these guys start to fly off the board. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. Actually, one more thing, because I know many of you guys follow it really damn closely too, would love to hear some thoughts and opinions on some of these top targets for Michigan. In your eyes, who are some of the biggest names that Michigan needs to close on? Because I got a few different kind of names as well we're going to talk about. Without further ado, let's get into it. Let's start with, hey, who are the names that Michigan has made moves for over the last couple of days? And these guys are all on commitment watch over the next couple of weeks. I want to start with really one of my favorite targets on Michigan's board, four-star wide receiver Travis Johnson from the state of Virginia. This is a guy that Michigan has prioritized wall to wall in the 2026 cycle. Had him on campus last weekend, made a significant move for Travis Johnson. Sounds like it's going to come down to Michigan, Penn State, South Carolina, with Michigan comfortably as a leader, so to say. This kid rocks. And it's been very clear that Sherrone Moore wants to add size to the wide receiver room over the next couple of years. Well, Travis Johnson has that. But what I think makes Travis Johnson feel a little bit different is I think he's more than just a bigger bodied wide receiver that works vertically down the field. I think he's a plus athlete in terms of yards after the catch. I think there's some real potential in terms of what he can be as a route runner with a little bit more development, because his movement skills for somebody that big and long, they're really impressive. I wouldn't be surprised if Travis Johnson can emerge as a wide receiver one kind of guy for Michigan over the next couple of years. And I think all Michigan fans feel the same way as I do here. We need more of these kind of dudes in the pass catcher room for Michigan over the next couple of years, especially as you want to make sure you're maximizing what Bryce Underwood is at quarterback over the next couple of years. Number two, this kid rocks. He's quickly emerged, and I really wasn't sure where Michigan stood on him. He's committed to SMU. Michigan likes this kid a lot, and they are pushing their chips in to go grab Markel Dabney. I think Michigan sees him as a linebacker, and I do too. You turn on the film and say, all right, he's a little bit smaller for an off-ball linebacker at the high school ranks. This kid's a freaking awesome athlete. Plays wide receiver, plays safety. You see him play a little nickel. He pretty much does it all on the defensive side of the football. And the thing I keep coming back to is Michigan wants linebackers that can play in space. In my opinion, it's been one of the biggest differences between the Michigan defenses of 5 to 10 years ago and where we sit right now. Is we got hyper athletic linebackers at the second level that can deal with some of the more high-powered offenses that you see in the Big Ten, especially as you add USC, Oregon into the mix. You need these linebackers to be able to run and chase and play in space. Markel Dabney can certainly do that. The only question here is how big can we get him? If he can get up to 230 pounds and, keep the athleticism and the ability to play in space that he has, Michigan's always so good at finding these diamonds in the rough. And I think Markel Dabney certainly could be that kind of guy. It doesn't even matter what I think. The Michigan coaches are a heck of a lot smarter than I am, and they love this kid. And it's very clear they want him in the 2026 cycle. Last name I'll throw out there in the secondary, Andre Clark. And I'm not totally sure how big the secondary class is going to be for Michigan in 2026 because Michigan I thought signed an awesome secondary class in 2025. Headlined by guys like Shamari Earls and Keona Winston. It's a really talented secondary class that Michigan signed in 2025. So I'm not sure how many guys they're going to bring in. Andre Clark makes a lot of sense because of the versatility. He can play boundary cornerback. He can play as a safety. I personally like him more as a safety because of the instincts he has in the back end and because of his ability to come downfield and tackle in space. But you're getting a safety here that is comfortable playing in man coverage, which is such a massive asset. When you have safeties that can operate in man coverage, and not a lot of these dudes can, when you get safeties that can, it kind of opens up a lot of different things you can do as a defensive coordinator. But if you don't have safeties that can play in man coverage, if there are liabilities in man coverage, well, you kind of get a little handcuffed in terms of how you can run your defense. Getting a guy like Andre Clark that I think can be a really good safety, but also play a little bit of man coverage, I think that's massive for this Michigan defense over the next couple of years. Going back to the big board, those are the three names that are all scheduled to commit within the next 3 weeks that it sounds like Michigan's the leader in the clubhouse for. Let's get into a little bit more of an exciting conversation. That is, hey, most important targets for Michigan. I should mention this, right? Savion Hiter. It sounds like Michigan values him about as high as anybody in the country. Everything you hear is that Michigan's going to be pushing their chips in. And here's the thing that I think should give Michigan fans a lot of optimism. Under Sherrone Moore, and it's not a huge sample size, but under Sherrone Moore, you think about guys like Bryce, you think about guys like Ty Haywood, you think about guys like Shamari Earls. When Michigan wants their guy, you've seen Michigan go out and get their guy. And that's not always something we said under Jim Harbaugh. Look, Jim Harbaugh did a ton of really good things for this Michigan program, obviously culminating in a national championship. On the recruiting trail, it felt like for some of those top end guys that Michigan might have really liked, they were unable to close on. We've seen Sherrone Moore find his guy and go get his guy. And I think wall to wall, it's been Savion Hiter at the running back position. And it sounds like Michigan's going to be right in it for this one. All right. Who are the most important guys for Michigan to go out and get moving forward? Some of the guys that are going to be on campus. I want to talk about five-star wide receiver Calvin Russell, and I got a little bit of a hot take, and I'm very excited to hear how the Michigan fans feel about this in the comment section. Look, if Calvin Russell ends up signing with Michigan, I would be fired up because the upside for this kid is astronomical. We just don't have many guys that have the upside and just quite frankly have that body that look like Calvin Russell. He's 6'5", he's 200 pounds, track and field background, legitimate hoops background, guy that probably, from what it sounds like, he wants to play basketball as well at the collegiate ranks and will be able to. Here's my maybe pushback you might say on Calvin Russell is I think he's far off from being a contributor at the Power 4 level. I think that five-star ranking has a lot more to do with the raw upside than it is of him as a player right now. And I look at, all right, how would Michigan want to use their – and it sounds like this recruitment is going to be NIL driven. Like if you want to go get Calvin Russell, you're going to have to pay for Calvin Russell. Does Michigan want to go push a ton of resources to a wide receiver in Calvin Russell that probably is going to be at least year 3, maybe year 2 until he's making an impact with this offense? Because you look at Calvin Russell and say coming out of his junior year, didn't even catch for over 800 yards. And so look, if Calvin Russell ends up signing with Michigan, I'm going to be fired up because I think this guy has legitimate first-round NFL draft talent. Is that where Michigan wants to go use their resources on? A guy that might take, you're probably going to be paying him a lot of money to just be, not playing a ton of football during his first 2 years. We'll see how that kind of plays out. I would love to hear the opinions, the thoughts from the Michigan fans in the comment section. Because I look at Travis Johnson and say, okay, although Calvin Russell probably has a little bit more upside, I think Travis Johnson's probably going to play earlier than a guy like Calvin Russell. Now, the next two names, you got to go to the tackle position. We know every single year Michigan's going to sign an elite offensive line clearance, or at least try to, right? You saw last year Babs, Ty Haywood, the two big tackle prospects on campus, Malachi Lee and Kelvin Abbott. Would like to see Michigan go out and land one of them. My personal preference is Calvin Abbott because I think he has a astronomically high upside. This is a kid from Idaho that's probably going to need a year or two before he's ready to play. This is why Michigan can afford to take a flyer on Calvin Abbott. You got Andrew Sprague. That's going to be here for at least 2 more years. You got Andrew Babelow, who's just starting his career at Michigan. You got a guy like Ty Haywood. I feel like Michigan has enough young tackles that will be playing significant football for them over the next couple of years to give Calvin Abbott a little bit of time to develop. But I'm looking at Calvin Abbott and say, hey, this kid has the potential to be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. Done a really good job with his body. He's a state champ in the shot put. Again, coming from Idaho, it's going to take a little bit before he can adjust to the Big Ten level of line of scrimmage play. Really big time upside. And then Malachi Lee from Hawaii. I like him too a lot. You land one of those two guys. You couple that with a guy like John Turrentine, who it sounds like Michigan's got a very real chance for, and say that's a quality offensive line class. And I don't think the offensive line class needs to be super big. What I would like to see Michigan do here is, hey, just go get, a couple guys that you like a lot. You don't have to worry about signing 7 of them because I think Michigan's deep enough and young enough in their offensive line room that you don't need a ton of bodies, but you want to bring in quality bodies is probably my take on the offensive line. I got another name that I love, I love, Titan Davis. This is the exact guy that Michigan has had a ton of success with, and it's coming down to Michigan and Alabama. Michigan's going to get the last official visit this weekend. He's the exact kind of defensive lineman Michigan's had a ton of success with. Some of the maybe smaller defensive linemen that are really, really athletic. Think about a guy like Mike Morris making the transition. Think about a guy like Chris Jenkins. Now, Mason Graham was kind of a freak. I don't really count Mason Graham to anybody. Kenny Grant was also kind of a unique unicorn. I think Michigan's had a ton of success with guys like Titan Davis. And here's the thing. This kid moves the way you want to see defensive linemen move. He needs to add a little bit more weight. He needs to add a little bit more physicality. He's going to do that over the next 18 months as he enrolls into his collegiate program. You can't teach the length and athleticism he has. I think he's got some real upside on the defensive line. And then the other thing I'll say here is I think this is a position that Michigan really wants to make sure they get right in 2026 for 2 different reasons. Number one, it's a really hard position to address in the portal. Michigan did a good job with it with guys like DeMond Payne and Trey Williams, but you don't want to be counting on landing those kind of guys every single year. So you want to make sure you're getting your guys, your dogs from the high school ranks. But number two, I think it was not a great defensive line class that Michigan signed in 2025. I love Nate Marshall, but you probably have question marks about how good some of the other guys in that 2025 cycle are going to be. So you want to make sure you get the defensive line class right, and they're off to a damn good start. Mikael Blade, who can play the edge, can play on the inside. You all know how I feel about Alistair Vallejo. You land Titan Davis, you're feeling damn good about what this defensive line is going to be over the next couple of years. In the secondary, we'll see how it plays out. Again, I don't think it needs to be a massive class for Michigan because they signed such a good class in 2025. And that's, kind of the roster building conversation I want to have is, all right, let's look at the positions that maybe we missed out on in 2025. At least in my opinion, the defensive line, you kind of want to see probably have a big and good class. And, offensive line secondary, you still want to see Michigan recruit that position dang well, but I don't think you need a 6-man secondary class and a 6-man offensive line class. Go focus your attention on a few of the best guys that you see in the country, Malachi Lee, Calvin Abbott, and I'm feeling dang good. We'll see how it plays out. Again, that we made this back in maybe early May. This has changed a lot as the official visits have played out for Michigan, and it's going to change more over the next couple of months. We saw Michigan late in the process last year in 2025, completely turn their recruiting board on its head. Getting in for a guy like Shamari Earls, obviously adding a guy like Bryce Underwood. This is subject to change, but we'll see what Michigan can do kind of closing on some of these bigger names in the summer months. And then we all know Michigan's going to get to work in the month of November as well. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let it fly in the comment section in terms of names you would like to see Michigan really close on in the 2026 cycle. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.